think that really the answer to that is what are the main drivers of value for an MSP? So first is the overall quality of the earnings. So what's the composition of the revenue look like? How much of it is services versus product sales? And then of the services, how much of it is driven by a contract versus just project work? So that's a very important component. And again, no magic line in the sand, but 50% or more recurring revenue is great. And then as a subset of that topic would be, what is the length of the contract? So all else being equal, an MSP that has annual contracts is going to be more valuable than an MSP that just has month-to-month agreements.
When we talk about mergers and acquisitions in the managed services profession, it gets a lot of different reaction. There are people who have been through a transaction before, know exactly what it entails and how difficult or easy, depending on your vantage point, it could be. But you have a lot of MSP business owners and executives who have never been through a full transaction. Maybe they've done a little bit of I call it playing footsie under the table, trying to negotiate a deal. Maybe you get to a letter of intent. Talk about that momentarily. But maybe you've never fully consummated a transaction. Well, we're going to unpack and do kind of an autopsy of what an ideal MSP involved M&A transaction might look like, and what things you would want to do to improve your odds of not only having a successful transaction running through to, but making sure you're getting a good deal and you're not forgetting kind of the fundamentals as either a buyer or a seller that might come back to harm you, and better things to know and think about earlier rather than wait until it's too late. So this is a very big, daunting task. So I couldn't do it by myself. So very pleased to have our guest on the MSPZone, Adam Borst, Vice President of Vista Business Group. Welcome aboard.
Thanks for having me. Appreciate it.
So I've got a quick bio on you. Hopefully it's accurate. Adam is a seasoned professional with a background in financial management and over $100 million in personally sourced transactions, specializing in IT and MSP acquisitions. At Vista Business Group, Adam helps business owners grow through acquisition, guiding both buyers and sellers through every step of the process. So, is that a fair job there?
You got it. I think so far in the last 5 years, we've sold, he's like 54, 55 IT businesses. So we're very, very active in the space. Yes.
So I'm just going to go through in no particular order because there's so much to discuss here. We could probably have an episode on each one of these topics, but I'd like to talk about the market conditions in general and what I would phrase as this last movement or this last peak of M&A activity really started, in my opinion, kind of at the beginning of the pandemic, right? We were already going into the pandemic with a lot of private equity interest in MSPs. I think that certainly lasted well into the pandemic. And I think that depending on who you talk to, that we could be either in a slight trough or maybe it's just a holding pattern until we hit the next plateau. But your take on where we are with the environment of MSP acquisitions?
That's a great question. And yes, I think you hit the nail on the head. The short answer is, it was a good market for sellers. It's become a great market. So some numbers to kind of back that up. We average a transaction every 3.5 weeks. We've been at that pace for many, many years now. That part, the number of MSPs that we sell has remained the same. What's changed drastically is the number of buyers that are coming to the table. So in years past, I should also say, most of the time when we sell a business, we're representing the seller. So in years past, when we would bring an MSP to market, we would expect there to be anywhere from 20 to 40 offers within a 30-day period, which obviously that's a lot of offers. But this year we're blowing those numbers out of the water. I almost hate to even say this because it sounds so ridiculous. So the average this year is 60 to 80 offers within a 30-day period. Yeah, yeah,
It's a
exactly.
lot.
Yeah. Other interesting aspects to that. One would be the structure. So, of course, obviously, that many buyers coming to the table, yes, that has shifted valuations upwards. So, what used to sell for maybe, 4 to 5 times the EBITDA is now selling for 5 to 6. Excuse me. Lots of caveats to that, but just as a generality. So, but as far as structure goes, in years past, we would expect the average offer to be anywhere from like 80 to 82% cash up front, with the balance being in the form of a seller's note. So it's call it 15% that's paid out over time. This year, the average is it's hovering right around 88% cash up front, and again, the balance being paid out over the course of a couple years. Is that it's not uncommon for there to be at least one offer that's 100% cash up front.
I got a question.
Yeah, yeah, go.
So I see two things that you said that might be correlated. You mentioned that there's more buyers in the market, assuming at least a percentage of that is from a private equity, home office, institutional investment shops. Would you characterize that increase in buyers as coming predominantly from a more institutional investor community?
Boy, you're asking good questions. Yes and no. Yes, but it's not just from that. So the shift that we've seen with PE is, yeah, I mean, they're coming out of the woodwork. But the other aspect to private equity getting more involved is that historically, when you think about private equity, typically they want $2 million of EBITDA before they'll even consider even taking a look at something. And this is especially since we're coming out of that, since we came out of COVID. That requirement has kind of gone out the window. There's a lot of PE groups out there that'll look at something that's just $1 million for the in EBITDA for the platform.
Okay.
And as a kind of a side note to that, if listeners aren't familiar with the term platform, so private equity, that there's really two types of investments that they make. The very first, whenever they're looking at getting involved in a new industry, there's they make their initial investment in that industry. It's called the platform. Beyond that, then everything, all the subsequent acquisitions are add-ons or tuck-ins, bolt-ons, however you want to say it. And size is not an issue at all once they make that initial platform investment. I say that, I mean, they want it to be somewhat meaningful in size, but there's a lot of PE groups that they'll buy something with just 1 million in total revenue.
So I'm hearing that there are more buyers, there's more competition for the sellers that are out there, and therefore we're seeing sweeteners like going up to near 90% cash, becoming more of the norm. That those are all good things, I would say, for the average MSP and for the profession as a whole.
Yeah, yeah, decidedly so. Absolutely.
What? Okay, so the for anyone out there listening, watching, the message would seem to be: no, you haven't waited too long. Do you still? Where do you think we are in this drive? Are we early on in adoption? Are we midway through? Are we nearing the end? Any sense of that? Tough question.
My crystal ball is it's as clear or murky as the next guy's. But boy, that's a great question. Depending on what numbers you look at, there's anywhere from like 15 to 35 legit IT businesses in the US. So there still is a lot of consolidation ahead. How long that takes? Certainly, I think we have at least another 3 years, solid 3 years. Realistically, probably at least another five. And the other part of it is that the it's somewhat easy for somebody that that they've been an employee at XYZ MSP for several years, and they're tired of working for the man, so to speak, and they want to go off and do their own thing. So it's easy for there to be new ones entering into the mix. So who knows how long?
Yeah. Well, that's an interesting point, Adam, that for as long as I remember, no matter how frenzied the M&A market was, there was always, and there still is today, a steady supply of new entrants into the market, meaning there are new MSPs being created, which my pet peeve in the day was, are we actually fragmented or this was pre the private equity time and era, but there always is opportunity for good quality MSPs out there, regardless of what's happening in the M&A market. But this is a good indicator of value, I think,
Yeah,
what you're
yeah,
saying.
for sure.
If you had to narrow it down to a handful of things, what makes a good transaction successful? From an MSP's standpoint, but also from a buyer's. I could guess what the buyer's is, but MSPs want to know what's successful.
Yeah. Um, the name of the game with is to reduce risk. So if you're an MSP owner, um, the things that keep you up at night, solve those problems, and you're doing yourself lots of favors when it comes time to transact. But trying to keep this to a short list here. Client concentrations, the more that you can reduce that, there's no magic line in the sand, but if there was, it would be somewhere around 20%. So ideally, you don't have any one single client that represents more than 20% of total revenue. And it's not a deal breaker for all buyers out there. It is for a handful of them, but one thing that it does do is it creates a lot more scrutiny beyond that point for most buyers out there. So that would be one. The quality of your contracts is important. Uh, having clearly defined scope of work, that's always helpful. What else? As far as just getting a deal done and getting it done at an attractive price in favorable terms, a big influencer of that is just the total number of buyers that are coming to the table. Because if you're just talking one on one with your buddy that has an MSP, and there's nothing wrong with that, there can be fantastic alignment. However, compare that to if you have, let's just say that it was only 20 serious offers. I mean, it's night and day difference. It's a million times easier negotiating when you have lots of other serious great offers in your back pocket. And you're not going to lay awake at night wondering if there's a better offer out there. And the other thing that does is that when you have that many buyers, you're the one in the driver's seat. So it becomes less of an issue of who's dangling the biggest carrot in front of you, and much, much more so a matter of who do you like the best? Who's actually the best fit for your clients, your employees, and you moving forward.
Yeah.
Other bullet points would be, and there's secret sauce on how to go about this, but at least having a plan, having an integration plan in place. That is, you hear two versions to an acquisition story. One is that it goes really well, and the other is that, oh man, it was just a disaster after the signing ceremony. And the difference is having a plan. So having a communication plan for two sets of plans. One is for the employees, and then the other's for the clients. Just as a general rule, the time to tell your employees that you're even thinking about selling the business is when you're introducing them to the new owner that's now their new boss officially. That is definitively the time. Yeah,
Not before when they
yeah,
could,
exactly.
cause problems.
Yep, if you can at all avoid it. Sometimes you absolutely have to loop somebody in, but just, man, be super guarded about that. So,
So I want to talk about buyer intent, seller intent, and just about the beginning phases of an M&A relationship. See a lot of, I think this is generally known as a buyer tactic, which is if you can approach first and maintain the high ground as a buyer, that's often better compared to having a seller who has chosen their time to go to market, right? If you get what I'm going at. What are your thoughts about, you get approached as an MSP? First of all, everybody who's an MSP is getting approached, right? So that's not even the issue. The
right.
question is, if you thought that you were interested in selling, what's your guidance for, do you wait to be approached, or should you approach the buyer market on your own terms? Where do you end up on that issue?
The answer is going to be different for every seller, just because some people, they want to really be super well educated. And for some people, the only way that they really get that is through talking with several buyers. Honestly, I would kind of lean towards just it can be a big distraction. I mean, if you really need to put a lot of time into it and really, talk with your spouse, say, hey, are we actually really ready to sell? Because otherwise, again, it's a waste of everybody's time, yours especially. So
Yeah, I think that's a great point, Adam. And I'd like your input on this as well, which is I sense that there are certainly MSPs who only care about, not there's anything wrong with it, top dollar. I'm going to get the best deal possible, and that's likely going to come from a private equity firm. And then I've talked to a number of MSPs who say, I don't think I'm going to fit into that. There's not a cultural fit with being part of a platform, and I want to stay doing what I'm doing, maybe grow through some individual non-PE backed acquisitions or mergers. What would you say about that seller mindset of are there PE friendly sellers and maybe less PE friendly sellers in the MSP market you're talking to?
yeah,
Does that make sense? That question?
I think so. Yeah. PE isn't necessarily good or bad. It's just a matter of alignment and what you're looking for. Uh, if you're looking for, um, if you're ready to just be done and you don't want a ton of involvement for the next 3 to 5 years, well, really 3 to 7 years, then yeah, maybe P isn't the best fit, and that's not the only deciding factor. But um, private equity almost always I don't want to say requires, but they strongly, strongly prefer for a portion of their payment to you to be in the form of what's called rolled equity. So just to make figures easy, let's just say that say you're selling for $5 million. So maybe four is cash up front, and then that last million, that's equity that you now have in their roll up. So you get what's called the second bite at the apple, where they're going to continue building it for the next whatever 3 to 7 years, and then once they have this big behemoth, then they go to sell, and you get, again, that's where you get the second bite of the apple with that second sale. And let me pause there. Did I answer your question?
I think so, because I just wanted to present to the people out there listening and watching this that there isn't only one type of buyer. There are many,
Right.
many different types of buyer personas who want to do, even in the PE sector. I've come to find that there are very short term, 2-3 year
Right.
hold periods, and then they want to flip it. There's others that are more, I want the profit. You run it for the next 20 years, right? Which is, we're starting to see a lot more of those. So it's very interesting just seeing the type of diversity emerging from the buyers. And that's good for a seller to know,
Right.
is my thought. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, you hit the nail on the head. Another aspect to that line of conversation is just the composition of the buyer pool in general. It still is dominated by, I know we've talked a lot about private equity, but surprisingly, it still is dominated by strategic acquirers. Other MSPs that are looking to grow through acquisition, they see private equity buying up a bunch of MSPs, and they're looking and go, well, I can do that too. Why wouldn't I just do that? Yeah. So there's really three big types of buyers. One is private equities we talk about, strategic acquirers, and then the third is just individuals. And surprisingly, that group has really grown a lot, especially since COVID.
The individuals.
Yeah. Yeah.
Would these be like search funds or
Yep.
okay, you're
Yeah.
talking search funds.
Yeah, exactly. So, yeah, and if folks aren't familiar with the term search funder, it's an individual. It used to be somebody that came out of an Ivy League school, ultra high net worth family, and their job for the first 2 years out of school is to find the perfect fit, and then their family would finance it, and they get a piece of the equity, and then they'd be the operator. That now has mushroomed into just think any individual that has significant enough resources to buy a business. And private equity groups, they will sponsor a lot of individuals as long as they have good operating chops.
Yeah, I can attest to that. I've not seen in the last 10 years as many grad students emailing me, "Hey, could I pick your brain for 30 minutes about are we being taught in some, MBA program?" But what you said, Adam, makes sense. They're talking about us as an investment pool or
Hmm.
or community. So from a buyer standpoint, tough market, competitive market. I like to say that, if those deals that everyone like 20, 30 years ago, I remember tons of people, especially during the dot-com fallout and post 9/11, they were looking for diamond in the rough deals and they were finding them. I don't want to say that they don't exist. I'd like your opinion as to whether those types of diamond in the rough opportunities are still around. What should a buyer of an MSP business know going into 2026?
Ooh,
What should they think about?
yeah. Well, I mean, I think that really the answer to that is what are the main drivers of value for an MSP? So first is the overall quality of the earnings. So what's the composition of the revenue look like? How much of it is services versus product sales? And then of the services, how much of it is driven by a contract versus just project work? So that's a very important component. And again, no magic line in the sand, but 50% or more recurring revenue is great. And then as a subset of that topic would be, what is the length of the contract? So all else being equal, an MSP that has annual contracts is going to be more valuable than an MSP that just has month-to-month agreements. So that'd be one. Another would be like what we talked about before is client concentrations. Ideally less than really in a perfect world is less than 5%. But it's very, very common for there to be somebody that's 10, 15% of revenue. Yeah.
So switching to, but basically, would you entertain a buyer who said, I want to pay no more than 20, 30% down in cash and finance the rest? Those days are
No.
gone, correct?
Yeah. There still are a lot of buyers out there that are looking for that.
That's what
So
I was getting at. Yeah. So
yeah, I mean, they were imprinted, like you were talking about. They're imprinted on what was going on 20 years ago. But from the seller's standpoint, I mean, why would they ever, in their wildest dreams, entertain an offer that's 20% cash up front? The rest is an earnout. By the way, again, there are buyers that think that that's. I
I know
can't
there are.
emphasize, but
Yeah.
you compare that to 88% cash up front. I mean, they're looking to sell the business because they want to reduce risk, not increase risk. So
Yeah, no, I get your point, and I just it was more of a reality check that you're
yeah, yeah,
still seeing those types of, I'm looking for the proverbial Ferrari under a tarp, with the old lady who hardly ever drives it anymore, right? She's never driven it since her late husband
right,
passed, right? But she's going to give it away for $500, right?
yeah,
No, that's not going to happen. All right, those deals
right.
don't exist today.
Yeah, yeah. No, you asked a great question, but yeah, there's just you framed it perfectly too. I mean, it's as a reality check for buyers, you're gonna have to bring cash to the table. It's just all the more there is to it, and then also as another distinction as far as structure goes, really the only time that we see earnouts involved is either when the seller wants a lot of upside. And they're like, "Hey, man, we can grow this thing, and we're gonna go to the moon." Okay, maybe an earnout makes sense, but even then, we don't really see it a ton. Where we really see earnouts is where if there's problems with the business. So if a client has 50% represents 50% of total revenue, then an earnout makes sense. And for those that aren't familiar with earnout, it's a seller's note essentially, but it's contingent on certain mutually agreed upon metrics being.
So, Adam, so if I'm hearing you right, still cash the predominant vehicle for getting deals done, with predominantly non-performance based notes for
Yes.
like a term and or carryover equity, and then least a performance based note like an earnout for all those other scenarios. Is that fair?
Yeah, so cash first and foremost. Second would it's almost the offers that win our contests are high degree of cash up front, and then the balance being in the form of a seller's note. And just we have a multi-step process when we're representing the seller. So we have all the initial offers that come in. We ask the seller to narrow it down to really the top 5 to 7 that they really like. And so the only ones that are picked, of course, it's influenced by the total dollar amount being offered, but rarely does an offer that has an earnout make it through to the next step.
I'd like to talk about timing
Mm,
and where I found a lot of forced conversations, forced scenarios where the MSP seller is minding their own business. They're growing their MSP practice. Things are going well. And all of a sudden they get a knock on the
mm.
proverbial door. Hey, are you interested in selling? And of course, people always used to say, well, everyone's for sale as long as the price is right, right? So you could see where there's a lot of opportunity to catch an MSP business owner off guard and to start them engaging in an M&A discussion when they weren't even really prepared for it. So that gets back to my question of, is it better to not engage with these one-off approaches if you're not in the market? Or should they start engaging with them and do it by themselves? Should they engage a broker, an intermediary like your firm? Should they get their lawyers involved? Right? Because there's a whole bunch of like I said, forced issues that come to the table when you are approached and you say, "Yes, I am interested in selling my business to you."
Right.
What are your thoughts there?
Sorry for the pause here. I want
It's a
to.
big question.
It's an excellent question. I talk with MSP owners all day, every day. That's what I do. It's 99% of what we're focused on as a firm, and everybody says that they're hit up 10 times a day by buyers. So, what I hear a lot of people doing is they just create they create a tag in their inbox, and then a lot of them don't even reply anymore. And so then when they're ready, then they'll go back and they'll say, "You still interested in buying?" So, and then that's the time they go to it. As far as just other advice, and this might sound like a plug. It's not. My suggestion would be we put together valuations for owners. We don't charge for it. And there's no strings attached. But the reason that we offer that is for the very issue that you're highlighting. And that's, we understand it's a huge decision. And, when we put together a valuation, it's our best estimate as to where most of the offers would be if we were to represent them and bring their business to market. Obviously it's not going to be accurate down to the cent, but we see 60 plus offers on a super regular basis for businesses just like yours. I mean, it'll give you some really concrete numbers to base your decision on. And we're always going to err on the side of being conservative, but that's a really excellent starting point because from we were talking about reality checks. From the seller standpoint, sometimes they're like, dang, I really thought I was gonna get 5 times total sales, like, and the other aspect of that is, not always, but commonly we'll identify things that, it's like, hey, if you have time on your side, here's a list of things that you might want to consider. Here's different things that you can do to groom the business, implement XYZ, and then get 12 months of those changes being on the books, and then go to market.
Yeah.
Kind of a meandering way to answer your question, but hopefully it did.
No, no, it did because I would interpret that to say, number one, there probably is no fear of missing out
No,
yet,
no.
right? Meaning that an MSP business owner who is thinking about selling and thinking, "Oh my gosh, did all the good buyers and all the good deals go away?" What I'm hearing from you is absolutely not, number one. And number two, there is often a very good reason to time your own entry into the market as a seller and not to do it in a reactive way where you're reacting to a buyer who's coming in trying to force a deal. Right. Obviously, they're trying to force a deal without all the other competitive bids coming in.
Right. Yeah, you hit the nail. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and there's not many buyers that have nasty tactics, but it is important for the sellers to keep in mind there are some buyers that play games and they'll chisel you on price. They'll beat you up, and if you're not going into it with the eyes wide open, unfortunately, you can get the wool pulled over your eyes. So,
I used to do M&A, so it's a bit of a leading question for you, but
okay.
between doing it yourself and there's plenty of MSP business owners who fancy themselves, savvy business owners, and I'm not saying that they're not, but there is something to be said about the process of selling your company, which is very emotional.
Mm.
And that is the last thing that you need to be an effective negotiator for your business, which is a huge argument for why they should use, third party firm like yours. Do you see many do it yourself types of deals, and how do they end up, how they turn out?
We see him occasionally. Again, this is probably going to sound biased, but I have the luxury of seeing lots and lots and lots of transactions. So my strong advice is a firm that specializes in this space, and it doesn't have to be us, but to use us as an example, we cast a really wide net, and we don't know all the buyers, obviously, but we know a lot. We know a lot of them, and we give you our colored commentary on the ones that we like, and we also have what I affectionately call a naughty list, folks that you know. Some are just straight up blacklisted for reasons we don't need to get into necessarily. So that's one reason, and then also, even if you're like, look at my inbox. Look at this folder that I created. There's 100 right there. Okay, yeah, but there's a lot of pitfall.
The due, the due diligence alone that a firm like yours will do is something that I feel most MSPs don't take seriously. Or if they do, they don't articulate it. But they feel like, hey, I've got 25 interested buyers in my inbox, like you said, if they're archiving them. That
Right,
doesn't mean that they're all qualified. That doesn't mean that they're all people you should talk to.
right.
And that's even assuming you know the process to run, and you're able to do it and have the bandwidth to do it.
Yeah, yeah, you're exactly right. So there's there's a world of difference between somebody that says, "Oh, I'd like to buy your business," and somebody that is going to actually provide an offer. So to your exact point, beyond that, then it doesn't work if you have 5 buyers this month, another 5 next month. They need to all be coming to the table all at the same time, and it's not just a full-time job; it's multiple people's full-time job. Um, so sorting through all of them efficiently it's critical. So and then beyond that, another aspect that you brought up is due diligence. We hold at a minimum weekly check-in calls with both the buyer and seller and us, all on the call. We do that at least weekly. Sometimes it's twice a week. And it's honestly, it's to keep the buyer on task largely, because no matter how sophisticated they are, it inevitably will go off in too many different directions for it to be manageable. So that's one. Even more important though, it's kind of the hidden benefit is that we know what milestones a buyer has to hit with their lender. And even if it's private equity still borrows money. So again, we know what milestones they need to be hitting. And if they're not asking the right questions, that's a huge red flag for us. And so when we hear certain things, one of the silliest is, when somebody says, well, we had a real productive call with our bank this week. Like, that's great, but that doesn't mean anything. They're just trying to buy themselves time.
Adam, I'm telling you, episode number 2, because we don't have time to do it for this one, but that's a whole separate PE financing. I would be shocked if there wasn't this belief out there that MSPs think of private equity firms as just sitting on a mountain of money that they're ready to write a check with. So when you say that a private equity has to go to a bank, a lot of people are saying, well, why would they go to a bank? Don't they already have the money? And then that, right? But that's a whole separate
Sure,
episode right there of just
exactly.
knowing who.
To kind of put a pretty bow on your question about the benefits of working with a broker, we run statistics on everything. One of the things that we track very closely is what kind of premium are we helping the seller to generate. So if you look at all the MSPs that we've sold on a case by case basis, and then you're to look at the average offer that they receive versus where they transact at, there's a huge premium, a huge premium. The average as of today, it's a 42% premium, which is astoundingly big. And if you think about that in relationship to our average fee, we have a tiered scale. So as the size of a transaction increases, our fee decreases as a percentage.
Yeah.
If it's a $5 million transaction, our fee works out to be a little less than 4.5%. So you compare that to the huge premium that you're getting. And on top of that, you get white glove service. I mean, that's a no brainer to me.
So, final topic or theory here are international buyers and international deals, maybe coming from Canada, maybe coming from. I'm assuming North America, specifically U.S., but not exclusively. I think Canada has got a tremendous number of really solid operating MSPs, but there are. This is an international game. Like, this is not just North American Silicon Valley private equity community exclusive. London, Hong Kong, Australia, South Africa, I've seen all over. What's your sentiment of that flavor of the international buyer, and what are they looking for anything different than their North American buyer counterparts?
Often there drives it off commonly is if they have clients across the globe and they're looking to get a footprint somewhere else just to provide service, have folks there on the ground locally. And then also so that way their support can follow the sun, so to speak. Issues that we see from US buyers, especially with Canada, well, not just Canada, but really across the board. The SBA, if the SBA is involved, they don't fund cross-border transactions. So that said, there's a number of Canadian buyers that are looking at our listings now. So as far as cross-border transactions, we do see it, but it's most of the time it's when we are representing the seller. The exception to that would be like if it's a significantly larger buyer. I did a search for a strategic buyer. They're enormously big. And they wanted me to find them an MSP in the UK. Somebody that's doing 1 billion in revenue, they're they're not going to care about they're not going to care about the SBA. They have really really deep PE pockets that they can go to. So and they're set up for financing cross border transactions.
Sure. Just in closing, Adam, I want to ask you about the MSP business owner that cares deeply about not only their customers, but care about their staff, and they care about what happens to them after a deal is done.
Mm.
What's your final concluding thoughts on what should those types of MSPs, sellers potentially be thinking about, and how would you guide them towards finding the right cultural fit, not just getting it maximum value, but the right fit?
I'm a broken record, but again, an excellent question. So one of the steps in our process is after all the initial offers come in, and then we ask the seller to pick the top 5 to 7 that they really like. Then we set up individual video calls with them and each one of those buyers. And those calls are critical for the point you highlighted. If somebody can put together an offer, it looks awesome on paper, and then you meet them, you're like, man, there's no way in the world I'd sell to them. And then the flip side is their offers right in the middle of the pack, and you're like, man, that's who I have to have. And at least for us, when we are representing the seller, it's fairly common for the seller to come to us and go, man, I know that top offers, that's hard to overlook, but man, in my heart of hearts, it's buyer number 2 that I'm in love with. And so we'll
Yeah.
go to them and say, hey, Charles really likes you. The problem is the top offer's here. You're only, you're below them by X. So if you could match that top offer, he would sell to you. That is it's 10 million times easier doing when you have lots of other offers in your back pocket.
Yeah, no, really good advice. Takeaways. Know you haven't missed the M&A boat, but prepare, get your house in order to maximize value. Think about taking the offense, not playing defense when you're receiving offers. That always is going to help you. Don't try to do it yourself unless you're really an expert and you have a ton of people ready to step in and help you, because I agree with you, Adam. This is not a job that one person who's also running an MSP business is going to be able to do themselves. That's a lot to take on. And should we expect another fervent, busy year in 2026 in terms of MSP M&A activity?
Yeah, the Fed cutting rates, that drives a lot of activity. So and I haven't heard a single talking head thinking that they're a serious one that expects anything but a rate cut.
Yeah. In fact, I think they did cut it. I don't know by how much, but I think we just got one officially,
Yeah.
but it's all good. So I look at all these things as being very positive and bullish for the MSP market. I still think that there's plenty of opportunity for growth, and this is evidence of it. So I really appreciate, Adam, you coming on, sharing your wisdom with us. And yeah, I think we've got a couple more episodes worth of topical material to cover that we didn't even begin to scratch on.
Thank you for having me. I really appreciate it.
Appreciate it.